Grace sat on the
Please
edge of her
don't
bed,
judge me for what I'm
holding her
about to tell
grandson
you.
Lucas's little blue shirt.
I've
The
carried
smell of
this
detergent
secret
and
for
warm
so long.
sunlight filled the small room. She loved helping around the house. It made her feel useful, part of something. Ever since she moved in with her son Thomas and his wife Olivia, she tried to stay quiet, not get in the way, and just do small things, like preparing breakfast or folding laundry. It wasn't her home, but she tried to make it feel like one. That evening, the house was quiet. The clock ticked softly. Grace was about to go to bed when she heard voices from the living room. Thomas and Olivia were talking. She didn't mean to listen, but her name made her freeze. Olivia's voice was sharp but tired. "Thomas, we can't keep doing this. She forgets things, she leaves the stove on. I'm scared something will happen." Grace frowned. "Forget things?" She didn't think she did that often. Thomas sighed. "I know, Olivia, but she's my mom. I can't just." Olivia cut him off. "You can't keep feeling guilty. She needs care. Real care. A nursing home would be better. They can take care of her there. We can visit every week." Grace's heart stopped. She gripped the edge of her blanket tightly. "A nursing home?" Thomas's voice was soft, unsure. "I just don't want her to feel like we're abandoning her." Olivia sighed again. "We're not. But we have work, bills, and Lucas. I'm exhausted. Please, Thomas, think about it." There was silence for a few seconds. Then Thomas whispered, "Okay, maybe you're right. I'll think about it." Grace felt her heart crack open. Her chest ached, and tears filled her eyes. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. The son she had raised all alone after her husband's death, the boy she had sacrificed everything for, was planning to send her away. She quietly sat back on the bed, unable to move. The room felt colder, the air heavier. She looked around at her small things. The framed picture of her wedding day, the handmade quilt she had sewn years ago, the photo of Thomas as a child smiling with missing teeth. Every corner of that room held a memory of love and care. But now, she felt like a stranger in her own son's home. Grace lay down, but she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind running through every moment of her life. How she had worked long hours to send Thomas to college, how proud she had been at his wedding, how she had held Lucas the day he was born and whispered, "You have my heart, little one." Now that heart was breaking. The clock showed 2 a.m. when she finally sat up. Her eyes were swollen, but her decision was clear. She couldn't stay here anymore, not where she was unwanted. But she didn't want to cause trouble either. She wouldn't yell, she wouldn't cry, she wouldn't blame. She would simply go. She pulled out an old brown suitcase from under the bed. It was small and worn but still strong. She packed only a few things, 2 dresses, a photo of her late husband, her medicine, and her favorite shawl. As she zipped the bag, she looked around the room one last time. Her gaze stopped on the family photo hanging on the wall, Thomas, Olivia, Lucas, and her. They were all smiling. Grace smiled faintly too, even through her tears. "Maybe they'll be happier without me," she whispered. At dawn, she sat at the dining table with a pen and a piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she began to write. "Dear Thomas, I heard what you said last night. Don't feel bad. I understand that you and Olivia have your own lives. I don't want to make things hard for you. Please don't worry about me. I'm going somewhere peaceful, somewhere I can live without being a burden. Take care of Lucas and tell him Grandma loves him very much. Love always. Mom." A tear fell onto the paper, making the ink blur a little. Grace smiled sadly and folded the note. She placed it neatly in the middle of the dining table, where they couldn't miss it. Before leaving, she walked quietly into Lucas's room. The boy was sleeping soundly, his small hand clutching his teddy bear. Grace brushed his hair gently and whispered, "Grandma loves you, my sweet boy." She stood there for a long moment, memorizing his face. Then she turned away, took her bag, and walked out into the soft morning light. The streets were still empty. The air was cool, the sky pale pink. Birds were just beginning to sing. Grace took a deep breath. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. Her legs trembled, but her steps were steady. Every move felt heavy but right. She whispered to herself, "I raised a good man. Maybe he forgot for a while, but one day, he'll remember." Grace walked down the road until the house disappeared behind her. She didn't look back. For the first time in years, she felt the pain of loneliness, but also a strange sense of freedom. She had no plan, no destination. Only her courage, her heart, and a single hope, that one day her family would understand what they had done. As the sun slowly rose, lighting the quiet town, Grace disappeared around the corner, her small figure swallowed by the golden light of morning. And on the dining table behind her, the letter waited, ready to break her son's heart.
For
The morning
years, I
started
carried
like
this
any
burden
other
in
day.
silence.
Thomas yawned as
But
he came
silence won't bring
downstairs,
them back.
adjusting his tie
Now,
and checking
I
his
have
phone.
to speak the
The
truth.
smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but something felt off. Normally, his mother, Grace, would already be sitting by the window, smiling softly with a cup of tea, waiting to say, "Good morning, Thomas." But today, the chair by the window was empty. He frowned a little, glancing at the clock. "Strange," he muttered. Maybe she was still asleep? He poured himself some coffee and looked toward her room. The door was slightly open, and a soft breeze came through the window. He knocked gently. "Mom." No answer. He pushed the door open and froze. The bed was neatly made, every corner tucked perfectly. Her favorite pillow was gone. The small picture frame of his father that always sat on her bedside table was missing. He opened the wardrobe. Half of her clothes were gone. Something cold ran through his chest. "Olivia," he called, his voice trembling. "Come here, quick." Olivia hurried in, holding a towel. "What's wrong?" "She's gone," he said quietly. "What do you mean, gone?" Thomas handed her the note that was lying on the pillow. His hands were shaking so hard that the paper rustled. Olivia unfolded it. Her eyes moved across the lines, her lips parting slightly. "Dear Thomas, I heard what you said last night. Don't feel bad. I understand that you and Olivia have your own lives. I don't want to make things hard for you. I'm going somewhere peaceful, where I can live without being a burden. Take care of Lucas and tell him Grandma loves him very much. Love always. Mom." Olivia's hand covered her mouth. "Oh my God!" Thomas grabbed the letter, staring at it in disbelief. "She heard us," he whispered. "She heard everything." His stomach twisted with guilt. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the note as his throat tightened. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. "What have I done?" Olivia sat beside him, silent. She wanted to say it wasn't his fault, but she couldn't. She remembered what she'd said the night before. Every word, every complaint. She felt shame burning in her chest. They both sat there, speechless, the morning light falling softly over the empty room. Then Thomas jumped up. "We have to find her." They started calling everyone they knew, neighbors, church friends, even the nearby grocery store where Grace sometimes bought bread. No one had seen her. Thomas called the police, explaining that his elderly mother had disappeared. The officer said they'd notify nearby stations and asked for a photo. By afternoon, the house was filled with tension. Lucas came home from school, running into the living room. "Grandma, I got an A on my test." "Grandma?" He looked around, confused. "Where is she?" Thomas knelt in front of him, trying to keep his voice steady. "Grandma went on a little trip, buddy." Lucas frowned. Without saying goodbye? That single question pierced Thomas's heart like a knife. He looked away, pretending to tie Lucas's shoe just to hide his trembling hands. That night, the house felt painfully quiet. The clock ticked louder than usual. Dinner sat untouched on the table. Olivia tried to eat, but her stomach churned. She looked at Thomas, who was staring blankly at Grace's empty chair. "She left because of us," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I promised Dad I'd take care of her. And I failed." Olivia reached for his hand. "We'll find her, Thomas. Maybe she went to visit someone." He shook his head. "She has no one else. We were all she had." Later that night, Thomas sat in Grace's room again. The smell of her lavender soap still lingered in the air. He noticed little things, the Bible open on her bedside table, her glasses neatly folded, the half-finished knitting project resting on the chair. Everything was in place, yet it all felt hollow without her. He picked up a photo from the table, one of him as a boy, standing with Grace and his father in front of their old house. Grace was smiling proudly, her arm around him. He remembered the time she had walked through a snowstorm to bring him lunch at school because he forgot it at home. He remembered how she used to stay up late, sewing his clothes when they couldn't afford new ones. All those memories crashed into him at once. He pressed the photo to his chest and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom." Meanwhile, Olivia sat alone in the living room, reading the note again. Her eyes fell on the line. "I don't want to be a burden." She started crying quietly. She hadn't meant to hurt Grace. She was just tired, overwhelmed, but now she realized how cruel her words had sounded. The guilt grew heavier by the hour. When midnight came, the house was still. Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept checking his phone, waiting for a call from the police. Every time it rang, his heart jumped, but it was never about Grace. He walked to the window and looked outside. The streetlights flickered. Somewhere out there, his mother was alone, probably scared, maybe cold. And it was because of him. He clenched his fists. "I'm not giving up," he whispered. "I'll find her no matter what." In another part of town, Grace sat on a park bench, watching the moon. Her bag rested by her feet, and her heart ached, but she didn't cry anymore. She looked up at the stars and whispered softly, "Maybe he'll understand one day." Back at home, her letters sat on the kitchen table again. The ink had smudged slightly where Thomas's tears had fallen earlier. The silence of the house felt heavy and sad. Like it, too, was waiting for Grace to come home. And though no one said it aloud, both Thomas and Olivia knew the truth deep inside. This wasn't just about finding Grace. It was about finding forgiveness. The next morning started with a phone call that made Thomas drop his cup of coffee. It was the local community center. A calm voice said, "Mr. Thompson, we think we've found your mother. She's safe." For a few seconds, Thomas couldn't even speak. His throat closed up. You found her?" he finally managed to say. "Yes," the woman replied kindly. "She came here yesterday morning. She's been helping out with our senior program. She said she wanted to volunteer." Thomas's knees felt weak. Olivia, who had been listening from across the table, covered her mouth. "She's volunteering?" They didn't wait another second. Within minutes, they were in the car, driving fast through the streets. The morning sun was bright, but inside the car, silence filled the air. Thomas gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding. When they arrived, the building looked old but warm. Bright flowers outside, cheerful voices coming from inside. It didn't look like a place for lost people. It looked like a place where people came to feel alive again. Thomas walked in first. Inside, a few elderly men and women were sitting around tables, laughing, folding paper flowers, and playing cards. And there, right in the center of the room, was Grace. She wore an apron over her dress and a soft smile on her face. She was serving bowls of soup to the others, carefully making sure everyone had enough. Her cheeks were slightly red from the heat, her eyes full of light. Thomas froze. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His mother looked so different, not broken, not sad, but peaceful. "Mom," he whispered. Grace turned, surprised. When she saw him, her eyes softened, but she didn't rush over or cry. She just said quietly, "Thomas, you found me." He ran to her, his voice shaking. "Mom, what are you doing here? We've been searching everywhere. Why didn't you call?" Grace set the ladle down and looked at him kindly. "Because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I needed time to think." Olivia stepped closer, her eyes red. "We were so worried, Grace. We thought." Grace gave a small, gentle smile. "That I couldn't take care of myself?" Thomas opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. The center manager, a kind woman with glasses, came forward. "Your mother is incredible," she said. "She walked in 2 days ago and asked if we needed help. She's been cooking, cleaning, and talking to everyone here. She's lifted the whole room's spirit." Grace looked down shyly. "I just wanted to do something useful." Thomas felt his chest tighten. He had thought she was fragile, weak, needing to be cared for. But standing here, he saw the truth. She was still the same strong, loving woman who had raised him, just older. The mistake wasn't hers. It was his. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'm so sorry. You heard what we said that night. We were wrong. I was wrong." Grace sighed softly. "Thomas, you're not a bad son. You're just busy. Life changes people. But when I heard you both talking about the nursing home, something broke inside me. I didn't want to stay where love felt like an obligation." Olivia began crying quietly. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Grace. I was tired, stressed, and I said terrible things." Grace touched her shoulder gently. "It's okay, dear. Sometimes we don't realize how words can wound someone. But I don't hate you. I just needed to remember who I am." There was silence for a few moments. Around them, the soft chatter of the other seniors continued, the sound of life going on. Thomas finally spoke. "Mom, please come home. Lucas misses you. We all do." Grace looked around at the smiling faces in the hall, the people she had helped these past few days. Then she looked back at Thomas. "Do you know what I realized here? These people, many of them have no one. They wait for someone to talk to them, to listen, to care. I thought I had nothing left to give, but here, I found purpose again." Thomas felt tears sliding down his cheeks. "You shouldn't have to find purpose alone. Let us be part of it, Mom. Please." Grace smiled warmly, the way she used to when he was little. "Maybe I can. But I don't want to be someone you take care of, Thomas. I want to live, to give, to feel needed again, not just tolerated. I understand, he whispered. You're right. You deserve that. At that moment, Lucas ran into the hall with a volunteer who had called the house earlier. Grandma, he shouted, running straight into her arms. Grace laughed for the first time in days as she hugged him tightly. Oh, my little Lucas. I missed you so much. Why did you go away? He asked, his big eyes full of confusion. Grace looked at Thomas and Olivia, then smiled gently at Lucas. Because Grandma needed to remind herself how strong she is. Lucas nodded like he understood everything. Can you come home now? Grace brushed a tear from his cheek. We'll see, sweetheart. Maybe Grandma can stay here and help people, and you can visit her. Would you like that? Lucas nodded quickly. Only if you promise to make pancakes again. Everyone laughed softly. Even Olivia smiled through her tears. As they all sat together in that small community center, the truth settled over them like sunlight through the window. Grace hadn't run away to escape them. She had walked away to find herself again. Thomas realized how blind he had been. All those times he thought she was weak, she was actually the strongest person in the room. She didn't want pity or comfort. She wanted respect and meaning. Before they left, Grace handed Thomas a bowl of soup she had made. Eat, she said kindly. You look tired. He smiled faintly, taking it from her hands. You never stop taking care of me, do you? Grace chuckled softly. That's what mothers do, Thomas. Even when their children forget how much they're loved. As he ate, the warmth of the soup spread through him, not just in his body, but in his heart. He looked at his mother, surrounded by laughter, purpose, and peace, and finally understood the truth that broke him completely. He hadn't lost his mother. He had almost lost her love, but she had found it again before it was too late. That night, after they found Grace at the community center, the house felt different.
Something I
It wasn't
haven't
just
really
quiet,
talked about
it was
until
careful.
now.
Thomas took down the old box from the top shelf and spread family photos on the table. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Olivia brewed tea the way Grace liked it, light and sweet, and placed it by the window where Grace usually sat. Lucas drew a picture of him and his grandma holding hands in front of a big building with a sign that said, Grandma's Place. The next morning, Thomas drove back to the community center alone. He waited outside until he saw his mother arrive with her small brown bag and warm smile. She noticed him and paused, unsure. He walked up slowly, like a boy again. Mom, he said, voice soft, I brought breakfast. The kind you used to make me before exams. She studied his face for a moment, then opened the box. Toast, eggs, and a small jar of jam. He remembered. She felt her heart bend and heal a little. They sat on a bench near the door while volunteers opened the hall. People passed by and waved at Grace, calling her name. She waved back, proud but humble. I want to make this right, Thomas said. Not with promises. With actions. Grace folded her hands in her lap. Actions are heavier than words, son. But they can also lift more. He nodded. We talked last night, Olivia and I. We don't want to move you anywhere you don't want to be. We want you to decide how you live. We'll support it. Grace looked at him long and kind. That's all I ever wanted. He took a breath. We also called a lawyer. Not because we want control. Because we want to protect your wishes, on paper. Your choices, in your words. Where you live, your health decisions, your money. No one will ever decide for you again. He swallowed, nervous. Would you be okay with that? Grace blinked back sudden tears. I would. Inside the center, soup simmered and chairs scraped the floor. The manager waved them in. You're just in time. We're planning a winter fundraiser. She smiled at Grace. I was hoping you'd lead the kitchen. Grace laughed softly. No one says no to a good soup. That afternoon, Olivia arrived with Lucas, carrying a bag of fresh vegetables and flour. Olivia walked up to Grace slowly, shame and hope fighting in her eyes. I'm sorry, she said, not hiding her tears. I was tired, and I blamed you for my tiredness. I forgot you're a person with a heart, not a job to be done. Grace pulled her into a careful hug. We all get tired, dear. It's what we do after that matters. Lucas tugged Grace's sleeve. Grandma, can I help you cook? She smiled. Yes, chef. Wash your hands first. Days turned to weeks. Grace kept her routine. Mornings at the center, evenings sometimes with family, sometimes with the quiet of her own small rented room nearby that the center helped her find at a senior discount. She chose it herself, bright curtains and a plant on the sill. Independence warmed her bones like sunshine. Thomas visited often, not to check on her, but to sit with her. He listened more, spoke less. He learned the names of the people at the center. Mr. Patel, who loved chess, Mrs. Moore, who knitted blankets for newborns, Alma, who danced slowly to old songs. He saw how they looked at Grace, as if she were a steady light in the room. The fundraiser day came with paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling and laughter stirring the air. Olivia managed the sign-in desk, Lucas handed out paper stars to pin on jackets, and Thomas set up tables and carried heavy boxes without being asked. Grace moved between the stoves like a gentle captain, tasting, adjusting, encouraging. The line for soup stretched to the door. In the middle of the rush, an older woman's hands began to shake. The bowl slipped. Grace caught it in time, steady and sure. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're safe here." The woman smiled, and the room seemed to breathe easier. Near closing, the manager tapped a spoon against a glass. "Everyone, may I have a moment?" The chatter softened. This center survives on love and effort. Today, one person has given us more of both than we could ever measure. She turned to Grace. "You walked in as a volunteer. You became our heart." She lifted a cloth from a small bronze plaque and read aloud. "Grace's Corner, for hands that feed and hearts that heal." The room burst into applause. Lucas jumped up and down. Thomas clapped hard, tears shining openly now. Olivia held Grace's hand and squeezed. Grace touched the plaque like it might float away if she didn't anchor it. Later, when the hall was quiet and they were stacking chairs, Thomas stood with his mother under the soft lights. "I used to think love meant sheltering you," he said. "Now I know it means standing beside you." Grace smiled. "You were always a good boy. You just forgot for a moment." He nodded, voice thick. "Thank you for letting me remember." On the way out, snow began to fall, soft, patient flakes that didn't rush their landing. They stepped outside together. Lucas ran ahead, mouth open to catch snow on his tongue, giggling. Olivia slipped her arm through Grace's. "Come home for dinner?" Olivia asked. No speeches, no fuss. Just dinner. Grace thought for a second, the snow catching in her hair like tiny lights. "Yes," she said. "And I'll bring bread for tomorrow's soup." They walked toward the car slowly, not hurrying the evening. Thomas opened the door for his mother without a word. She smiled and let him. It wasn't pity. It was care. There is a difference. At home, the table was simple but warm. Lucas set out mismatched plates like a ceremony. They ate, laughed softly, and left the television off. When it was time to leave, Thomas carried the empty dish to the sink and, without looking at anyone, said, "Same time tomorrow?" Grace nodded. "Same time." Before she went to bed that night, Grace took a pen and a fresh sheet of paper. She wrote only one line and taped it inside her cupboard where she would see it each morning. "I am not a burden. I am a blessing, and so are they." Weeks later, the lawyer papers were signed exactly as Grace wanted. The center's kitchen kept growing busier. Families began to join the Saturday meals. People brought stories, not judgments. Love learned to work with dignity, not against it. No one mentioned the nursing home again. It wasn't a banned word. It simply no longer fit the story they were writing together. On a bright afternoon, Lucas tugged Grace's sleeve. "Grandma, what did you teach Dad?" Grace looked at Thomas, then back at the boy. "I taught him that love is not a cage," she said. "It's a door you hold open." Thomas smiled. Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. And Grace, who had left so she could be seen, stood in the doorway of her own life, open, steady, and finally completely home.